We've already gone over the best SNES games ever released to the console, but what about the games remembered only by the seriously committed? From forgotten RPGs and neglected brawlers to weird platformers and other strange titles that never had a chance to truly shine, we've collected 10 SNES hidden gems that you need to play as soon as possible. But first, did you know that we have a second channel? Be sure to subscribe to Vault for more from us. Go on. Do a sub. Subscribe. Numero 1. Evo Search for Eden. Quite frankly, the premise for Evo Search for Eden is extremely ambitious for 1992, the year in which the game was released by publisher Enix. Known for role-playing games like the Dragon Quest series, Evo makes a little more sense given their experience. However, developer Almanac created something very different that used the RPG mechanics as a jumping point to something very interesting. Divided into several distinct geological periods, each period consists of several stages. You begin the game as a sea organism that must evolve into something developed and powerful. This is where the RPG portion makes sense, with players using points to evolve their character as they progress in the non-linear story. Evolving your character in this fashion is fun and was pretty unique for a console game in the early 90s, isn't it? It sounds pretty unique and fun now if you ask me. While perhaps a little slow-paced at times, Evo Search for Eden is a fully realised premise with surprisingly addictive gameplay. It's not a huge surprise this game slipped under the radar in 1992 given its decidedly odd premise and, let's be honest, bad name, but it's one we'd love to see more people talk about. Numero 2. The Ignition Factor. The Ignition Factor is a good case in point that Jaylaco sometimes made really good games, offering a release that's both a shooter and technically a firefighter sim. Each level pits you and your firefighting gear against massive burns across multiple rooms, in large areas, or even across the entire floor of a building. Yes, I messed up saying areas there, but let's move on. Your task is to put out the fire, yes, but as you'll soon discover after a few minutes, there's a lot more to it than that. The Ignition Factor offers some surprising variety in the fires you'll be fighting, with a number of environmental challenges to keep the straightforward, addictive gameplay feeling fresh. You'll also find yourself exploring your dangerous surroundings a good deal more than you might like, and the game is good at creating an atmosphere of tension as you battle the flames and look for people to rescue. Good graphics, especially for a Jaylaco game, are a neat little bonus on top. It's not the deepest game of all time, but there's a lot of unique challenge here, and it's available to play on the Switch's SNES Virtual Console. Number 3. X-Kaliber 2097. No, we didn't choose this just because of the name, which does weird. While the gameplay is a tad uninspired, and you should get ready for some of that cheap 90s video game frustration we all know and love, X-Kaliber 2097 is a visually striking, action-packed hack and slash that's well worth a look for fans of that kind of frenetic, frustrating experience. Set in the dystopian hellscape of 2097, if you can believe it, players control the appropriately named Slash across a series of stages that will have you battling relentless hordes of enemies, not to mention bosses that even someone with experience in these sort of games will find pretty challenging. Hope you're a fan of visually horrifying monsters that block most of your attacks. Yeah, it's not hard to see why X-Kaliber 2097 didn't quite find its audience in 1994. You have to experience the game in motion to appreciate its unique art style, stiff challenge, and that utterly fantastic soundtrack by Psycho Sonic. While experienced run and gun fans may find less of a challenge than others, anyone who appreciates steady action and great character designs will want to check this out. We just wish the game went on for a little longer, although most people will probably never want to play it ever again after beating that final boss, Blanca looking dead-ass motherfucking bitch. Number 4. Phantom 2040. It makes sense to find Phantom 2040 among a list of underrated SNES games, since it's based on the also extremely underrated 1990s cartoon inspired by the 1930s newspaper comic strip. While you absolutely do not need to watch Phantom 2040 to appreciate this action-adventure platformer, go check it out anyway. It's pretty sick. Phantom 2040 as a vidicam will be of particular interest to Metroidvania fans. Much of your time here will be spent running around elaborate, challenging areas with different paths connecting you to different story beats that can have dramatic influence upon the ending you receive. That and the heavy emphasis on exploration gives Phantom 2040 an impressive degree of depth, but the gameplay is still easy to pick up and play too. Again, Metroidvania fans do not want to sleep on Phantom 2040, as it's another SNES game with a stellar soundtrack, memorable character designs, and a sense of fast-paced, fluid action that impressively feels right at home with the slower, more exploratory portions of the game. Number 5. Harley's Humongous Adventure. While the box art for Harley's Humongous Adventure might suggest some pretty standard 90s fare, look at the dude's shades and backwards cap, I mean, the actual experience of playing this unique platformer is something else altogether. A title that may make some dudes feel threatened is no doubt one of the reasons why this game got so little attention in 1993 and still isn't mentioned nearly as often as we'd like by SNES fans. Delivering on its promise of a humongous adventure starring a guy named Harley, who sadly is not Harley Race, players find themselves shrunk down to the size of a bar of soap. It's your job now to find the pieces of your shrinking machine strewn around your house in order to return Harley to his normal size. It's a cute premise that may have been lifted from the Mouse House a little bit, and Harley's Humongous Adventure doesn't let you down on exploring that idea to its potential. The stages of the game take you to different parts of the house with everything appropriately made to scale. You're going to be driving a toy tank, battling a giant rat, and just trying to survive amidst the game's bizarre sense of humour and blend of digitised claymation and traditional pixel art. Don't expect the world from it, and you'll have a pretty nice time. Number 6, Lufia 2 Rise of the Sinistrals. Lufia 2 is a clever example of the RPG genre and deserves to be considered in the same breath as the more well-known RPGs that came to the SNES in the 90s. Despite being set 99 years before the first game, Lufia and the Fortress of Doom, you really don't need to play the first game to have fun here. Playing as an ancestor of the first game's protagonist, players will learn the origins of that game's antagonists while exploring complex, often baffling dungeons. Most RPGs emphasize solving puzzles to some degree, but Lufia 2 Rise of the Sinistrals makes much more out of them, meaning you'll be exploring and searching for a variety of items to help you move along. Lufia 2 also has a capsule monster system to run alongside its traditional turn-based structure. Monsters you find along your journey can become invaluable allies, made even stronger by giving them certain items, such as armor and fruit. Give me a kiwi and I can take on the world. The soundtrack by composer Yasunori Shiono is also a highlight, underscoring an RPG that just wasn't graphically flashy enough to be a hit back in its day, and that's reflected in its price today. Wow. Number 7, Soul Blazer. We're back again with Enix for Soul Blazer, which feels at times like a spiritual relative to the Legend of Zelda games. Enix really seemed to have a knack for publishing unique games that seemingly no one wanted to play. We can perhaps blame the failure of Soul Blazer on poor distribution. The truth is that there were just too many games to go around for the SNES at the peak of its lifespan. Most of us just couldn't keep up at the time, but Soul Blazer deserves to blaze its way into your soul.
What the hell are you talking about?
Soul Blazer starts to feel like its own special thing once you start getting into the meat of the game, which sees you travelling to exotic places, slaying demons, saving souls, and rebuilding the world in the aftermath of a cataclysmic event. You'll be travelling back and forth between the 6 worlds of the game quite a bit, destroying the seals found throughout to release the souls trapped inside. Each seal you encounter influences the game in some way, and while this formula doesn't change too much, it never stops being deeply engrossing either. Soul Blazer is a surprisingly dark game for the SNES, as it's not every day you have to rescue cursed souls to refill a completely depleted world, but the somber premise helps Soul Blazer stand apart from the hordes of other RPGs on the console. A rare RPG on the SNES that nobody bought from Enix. Yeah, you probably saw the $300 CIB price tag coming from a mile off here, didn't you? Crikey. Number 8, Gemfire. While Gemfire may not be as famous as Koei titles like Romance of the Three Kingdoms or Dynasty Warriors, it's interesting to see one of their strategy games in a traditional fantasy format. 6 wizards are freed from a gemstone and are each tasked with restoring order to a kingdom under tyrannical rule. Each wizard has sided with one of the powerful families of the region, and it's up to you to marshal magic and tangible resources to bring peace to the land by any means necessary. Gemfire is definitely a game that came from the developers of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, with players leading their armies into combat with careful attention being necessary to every detail of the campaign. However, compared to the Romance system, which has very similar mechanics to Gemfire, the latter is much more streamlined and accessible. It's easy to get a sense of what you have, including melee mounted range and most interestingly of all, magic units, and build something that will bring the other houses down. There's still a lot to absorb here, particularly for newcomers to the turn-based strategy genre, but Gemfire has addictive gameplay against a fascinating narrative backdrop. The diversity in monsters alone speaks to this game's depth. Also, that box art, cold. Number 9, oh yeah, it's Uniracers. Uniracers is pure simple joy, as video games tend to go. You control a unicycle along a 2D course that's filled with obstacles. That's basically it. There's a level of accessibility here that makes it something that almost anyone with even a vague interest in gaming can enjoy. Yeah, it's a relatively beloved game, but it still doesn't get enough dang credit for being one of the best racers on the SNES. Uniracers is simple in concept and execution, but it's when you begin to rely on increasingly elaborate tricks to score the points necessary to beat the clock or your opponent that it starts to cook. And Uniracers suddenly becomes a shockingly inventive and challenging racer. You'll be pushing yourself to come up with better and better tricks. Don't know why I said better like that. Not surprisingly, the 2-player mode is spectacular fun. So what happened to Uniracers then? While the game sold its initial run of 300,000 copies, the game was suddenly pulled from production due to a lawsuit from Bad Guys Pixar. The animation studio argued that Uniracers stole its concept from their 1987 short film Red's Dream. The judge's ruling seemingly coming down to the fact that yes, both of these things did have a unicycle in them. It's arguably the biggest reason why this game didn't go further. Uniracers then and now deserves a hell of a lot better than being the victim of a frivolous lawsuit. Uniracers, unite! And number 10, The Legend of the Mystical Ninja. Even if you didn't play The Legend of the Mystical Ninja for the SNES, there's a good chance you'll recognise the box art as soon as you see it. That kid and that tiger are ready to kick some serious arse, and we should probably just get out of their way and put the pipe down while we're at it. Part of the very long-running Gambari Goemon series, The Legend of the Mystical Ninja is a fantastic hybrid of overhead view action games and fast-paced platforming. Controlling either Goemon, an iconic Japanese folk hero dating back to the 16th century, or his partner Ibisumaru, players split their time between brawling and throwing items in the aforementioned overhead sections and managing some very tricky platform mechanics in the second part. It's a good formula that keeps the proceedings from ever getting too stale. Not only is The Legend of the Mystical Ninja a lot of fun to play, but it's also a lot of fun to just look at. Bright, vivid graphics and some memorable character designs make it easy to play through the entire game, and wish there was even a little more at the end. Maybe someday we'll get that collection we all suddenly find ourselves wishing was really a thing. We also wish this ad for the N64 game was a real thing too. Leisure Suit Goemon when? And that was our video looking at some of the best hidden gems on the SNES, or the Super NES, or the SNES, or the Super Nintendo Entertainment Symposium. What did we miss out? Be sure to let us know down in the comments down below. I've been Jimmy for Kulch Vulch. Bye!